have low vision, or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
All right, good morning. And this is George Collins, and for the next hour, I will be reading from the March 6th, 2026 issue of the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. In domestic news, national news, headline, Trump removes NOAM as Homeland Security. Subheadline, testimony at hearing enraged the president. Senator Mullen picked to take her place. President Trump ousted Kristi Noem as Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, saying Thursday he would replace her with Senator Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma, who is a longtime staunch, and I emphasize the word staunch, supporter of President Trump. Noem becomes the first cabinet secretary to be fired by Trump in his second term. Her departure follows a tumultuous tenure that culminated in two high-profile killings of U.S. citizens, believe it or don't, by federal immigration agents and a pair of congressional hearings that displayed bipartisan frustration with her leadership. The final straw for Trump was Noem's combative hearing Tuesday before the Senate Judiciary Committee. The president watched the testimony and was apoplectic about her performance, telling advisors that evening he would remove her from the job, according to people familiar with the matter. Trump also began calling members of Congress and asking for replacement ideas, the person said. Trump fired Noem in a phone call minutes before she took the stage in Nashville, Tennessee, to deliver remarks on law enforcement and take questions, according to a person familiar with the call. In a social media post, Trump said he was naming Noem as his special envoy for the Shield of the Americas, which is a new security initiative expected to be launched by the administration in Florida this weekend. Noem thanked Trump for the new appointment. Quote, in this new role, I will be able to build on the partnerships and national security expertise I have forged over the last 13 months as Secretary of Homeland Security, she wrote on social media. Senator Mullen, a Republican, said Thursday afternoon that he found out about the president nominating him for the role only, quote, a little before, close quote, it was public. Noem's decision to allot more than $200 million for an ad campaign featuring herself urging those living illegally in the U.S. to self-deport had already rankled the president for months for its self-promotional style. At this week's hearing, Noem told senators that the president had signed off on the campaign, which was an assertion that upset Trump, who told senators and advisors he hadn't approved it. So apparently Kristi Noem was taking liberties with the fact that bothered Trump, even though taking liberties with the facts is one of Trump's trademarks. Noem said the ads had been effective, leading Senator John Kennedy, a Louisiana Republican, to shoot back that they had been, quote, effective in building Noem's name recognition, close quote. Touche. Noem also told Kennedy that Trump had approved of her running the ads. Quote, it's hard for me to believe, knowing the president I do, that you said, Mr. President, here's some ads I cut, and I'm going to spend $220 million running them, that he would have agreed to that, Kennedy responded. The Department of Homeland Security's Inspector General is looking into the ad contract, according to people familiar with the investigation. The watchdog is conducting an audit of the contract awarding process at the department. Corey Lewandowski, a top advisor to Noam and one of Trump's attack dogs, who managed Trump's campaign in 2016 and has maintained a close relationship with the president, had a contentious conversation with Trump on Tuesday following Noam's testimony, according to White House officials. Across the White House, Noam had lost the confidence of almost all of Trump's senior aides, who were baffled at her management of the agency and her empowerment of Lewandowski, according to people familiar with the matter. White House officials heard repeatedly that from border czar Tom Homan, as well as DHS officials, lawmakers, and lobbyists about her behavior, two of the people said. Mr. Homan, who was the border czar, was particularly incensed with Noam and Lewandowski because apparently they were having an affair. By the end, she was barely on speaking terms with Homan or other top DHS officials, according to sources. In her testimony at a second hearing on Wednesday before the House Judiciary Committee, Noam admitted that one of the contracts for the ads did not go through a competitive bidding process, which contradicted her Senate testimony the previous day. Noam was grilled in both hearings for part of the funding going to a subcontractor with ties to her outgoing spokeswoman, Tricia McLaughlin. Noam had made herself the face of Trump's increasingly unpopular mass deportation campaign, and her chaotic leadership style of the sprawling department came under scrutiny over the last year. The Wall Street Journal detailed last month how Noam had attempted to burnish her personal stardom, staging a headline-grabbing immigration crackdown while retaliating against rivals and dissenters. Democrats in Congress are currently withholding their support for DHS funding to try to extract concessions on changing the department's enforcement methods. Trump had previously publicly defended Noam in the face of widespread criticism of her, especially since the January immigration operation in Minneapolis. Over the course of that deployment, agents killed 2 U.S. citizens, Renee Good and Alex Priddy. Noam had claimed Priddy was linked to, quote, domestic terrorism, close quote, despite the fact that he was a long-employed nurse at a nearby hospital. In several heated moments during her congressional hearings, Noam declined to retract her characterization of Priddy or apologize for it. For months, Department officials have been frustrated with Noam and Lewandowski, who is employed as a special government employee but has amassed enough power to play a key role in spending, policy, and personnel decisions. Some people have also pointed out to a pattern of Noam ignoring or playing down national security concerns, as the Journal previously reported. Lewandowski and Noam, who are both married, have denied reports of an affair, but officials have said they do little to hide their relationship inside the department. The pair have lately been using a luxury 737 MAX jet with a private cabin and back for their travel around the country. DHS is leasing the plane, but is in the process of buying it for approximately $70 million. During the congressional hearings, Noam said the jet was being refurbished to remove the bedroom, and the jet would save the taxpayers money. She was also repeatedly questioned on her decision to put any department spending larger than $100,000 under an approval process that has held up contracts across DHS. The department is flush with recently appropriated billions from the president's major legislative package last year, which he entitled the, quote, one big beautiful bill, close quote. Given Lewandowski's continuing business interests in the private sector, his role in awarding contracts has raised alarm bells inside the White House as well as DHS, as previously reported by the Wall Street Journal. Noam inaccurately claimed during her Senate testimony that Lewandowski did not play a role in the contracting process, and also said the department closely tracked the work of special government employees who are only permitted to work 130 days a year. Department officials said Lewandowski is always by Noam's side and has exceeded the 130-day limit. Last year, the White House counsel's office opened an inquiry into Lewandowski's potential abuse of the special government employee role. For all the accusations against her, Noam went down for a simple reason, said David Richardson, the former head of the Federal Emergency Management Agency under Noam. Don't cross Trump, Richardson said. Never blame your boss. In international news, the war in Iran continues. Headline, Pentagon races to secure cash for Iranian operations, notwithstanding the fact that the Pentagon budget is almost $1 billion. Pentagon officials are drawing up plans to replenish U.S. munitions that were expended fighting Iran over the past week, according to people familiar with the matter. A step in the Trump administration's efforts to drastically increase the number of missiles made each year. Lawmakers in Congress and the defense industry officials are expecting a funding request from the Pentagon to pay for costs associated with the war. The funding would support the purchase of Patriot, Tomahawk, and THAAD missile systems, which have been in heavy use since the U.S. and Israel began their strikes last week. Recent fighting in the Middle East has burned through stockpiles for some of those weapons. That has added a new challenge for the Defense Department, which is wrestling with how to pay for a war with an indefinite end date. It is also facing an industrial base that was already stretched to meet current demand and potential threats from China. The conflict in the Middle East continued to escalate on Thursday, with Israel saying it started another wave of large-scale strikes on Tehran and struck Hezbollah command centers in Beirut, while Iran fired more missiles towards Israel and hit its northern neighbor, Azerbaijan, which is the latest nation to be dragged into the war. Meanwhile, the State Department closed the U.S. Embassy in Kuwait on Thursday after suspending operations on Tuesday and previously advising Americans in Kuwait to shelter in place. I'm trying to get a pardon me. Nearly 20,000 Americans have returned to the U.S. from the Mideast since the conflict began. In a statement on Thursday, Johnson said those figures don't include U.S. citizens who fled to other countries or are in transit. President Trump pledged in January that the next defense budget would reach $1.5 trillion, which is roughly a $500 billion increase from current levels. Unbelievable. The U.S. military has more than enough munitions, ammo, and weapons stockpiles to achieve the goals of Operation Epic Fury laid out by President Trump and beyond, said White House spokeswoman attack dog Carolyn Leavitt. She added that the president, quote, will continue to call on defense contractors to more quickly build American-made weapons, which are the best in the world, close quote. Defense Department representatives did not respond to requests for comments. Okay. Continuing with the Iranian situation, the U.S. and Israel said they have degraded Iran's missile stockpiles and launchers, blunting Tehran's ability to unleash the massive barrages that opened the conflict. Yet Iran is still striking back by widening the war across the Mideast, hitting at least 11 countries in 6 days, and jolting the global economy in a bid to pressure Washington to end the war. Iran's ballistic missile launches were down 90% from the first day of fighting, according to the Pentagon. On Thursday, drone attacks fell by 83% from the first days of the war. The U.S. and Israel are betting that crippling Iran's missile arsenal is key to crushing the regime's ability to fight back. But Iran still has other ways to retaliate. Most important, its arsenal of low-cost drones. It continues to launch drones by the hundreds at Arab neighbors across the Persian Gulf, spreading fear, roiling markets, and disrupting the quality of life in these countries. Now, shifting gears to domestic news. In education, high schools, according to the headline here, high schools are losing the fight against pot, even during class. Jeez. Legalization makes marijuana culturally acceptable and easy to get for underage students. It was a party in the bathroom. It was 10:09 a.m. and 22 seconds on a Friday morning at Liberty High School when an alert dinged on James Geiss's phone. Quote, high vape index, close quote. He dashed out of the administrative building and jumped into a golf cart, racing across the school's sprawling campus to the location identified in the alert, which was the girls' bathroom. Within minutes, he was outside the door. A girl walked out. He said, "Can I talk to you? Was there anybody else in there with you?" said Geiss, one of the school's campus supervisors, whose job it is to combat marijuana use, or what many Liberty students refer to as narcs. Two more girls walked out. Geiss told the students that a vape sensor went off. "What would happen if I ran?" one of the girls said. And he responded, "We would get you when you come back." She didn't run, and he ushered the students into a conference room where Liberty's principal searched their backpacks and found hand sanitizers, folders, perfume, a pair of black leggings, empty potato bag chips. So the principal had the girls, 2 seniors and 1 freshman, turn their jeans pockets inside out and patted down the hoods of their sweatshirts. One of the students spoke slowly and seemed glassy-eyed. Another campus supervisor hung back to search the empty bathroom. Eventually, he found an empty box for a vape cartridge stuffed under a bag lining a metal trash receptacle. Liberty High is on the front lines of a battle to keep weed out of American high schools. It is an uphill one. California legalized medical marijuana in 1996, being the first state to do so. Recreational marijuana has been legal in California since 2016, with retail sales beginning in 2018, when Liberty High's current seniors were still in elementary school. Now 24 states plus Washington, D.C. have legalized marijuana for recreational use. While the legal age to buy marijuana is 21 in California, 18 for medical marijuana, students said it is easy to get from older brothers and sisters or friends or acquaintances. Dispensaries often offer delivery requiring adults to show valid ID. Students at Liberty have been known to hide contraband in their underwear, their bras, and places they know that the school staff cannot look. Often students flush the evidence. When maintenance workers tried to fix a blocked toilet recently, they fished out about a dozen vape cartridges and pens from the plumbing. "It's a cat and mouse game," said the principal. The girls' parents would be informed that the kids were in the bathroom when a vape sensor went off, but that's the only punishment. Okay. Let's see, what else? Let me pause for a moment here to remind you that you have been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Headline, U.S. News. Emmanuel has blunt prescription for 2028 election. He is a possible presidential candidate who faults his party on strategy and cultural issues. Rahm Emanuel, former mayor of Chicago and former chief of staff in the Obama White House, is delivering the Democratic Party a dose of tough medicine in his usual blunt style as the party enters a critical midterm primary season. Asked at a recent fundraiser in this affluent Detroit suburb of Birmingham in Michigan how Democrats might be able to win back the working class voters who've defected to Trump, Emanuel faulted his party in 2024 for being too focused on things such as transgender rights and not enough on pocketbook issues. Quote, "We weren't very good in this last election at the kitchen table. We weren't very good in the family room," said Emanuel, who was also the former U.S. ambassador to Japan. "The only room we occupied in the house was the bathroom, and it's the smallest room in the house." Not sure what that means, but in any event. In an interview, Emanuel said his party grew too complacent during Barack Obama's presidency, assuming the demographics of a diversifying nation would favor them going forward. He also said Democrats are now too fixated on Trump and it's hurting their chances in future elections. Quote, "We became intellectually flabby and we became intellectually lazy," said Emanuel. "To gain the confidence of the American people, you cannot just be a resistance. You also have to be a renewal. One of the things I'm trying to do is lay out that agenda." The stops that Emanuel made during a 3-day Michigan swing showcased the breadth of his resume. They also made clear the seriousness of his ambitions as he deployed a small advance team to make preparations ahead of his stops and a professional video camera operator filming every public move. Unbound by elected office, Emanuel is getting an early jump on the 2028 race before it becomes more fully engaged after November's election. He's also trying to make his mark in the so-called ideas primary as he works to push Democrats into a more moderate direction. He's 66 years old, and he has called for mandatory retirement age of 75 for presidents, cabinet officials, congressional members, and federal judges. He has suggested America should match other nations in prohibiting children under 16 from using major social media platforms. He has proposed universal national service program for young Americans and called on states to adopt mandatory third-grade reading standards. During his swing through Michigan, which was a presidential battleground in the last election, Emanuel proposed $10,000 in assistance for military service members to transition to skilled trades when returning to civilian life. He toured an apprentice training center south of Grand Rapids where he chatted with trainees and union representatives and confessed that a power saw gave him the, quote, heebie-jeebies, close quote, because he lost part of his middle finger in a meat slicer working at an Arby's restaurant in high school, which is visible in the picture of him taken along with this article. During an appearance at the Detroit Economic Club, Emanuel said he planned to offer a lot of bluntness between now and 2028. He said, "I don't give a crap. I'm going to tell you what I think we've got to get done. You like it? Great. If you don't like it, you can join my family and not like me." Kelly Breen, a suburban Detroit state rep who attended the fundraiser here, said Emanuel was on her list of potential 2028 presidential candidates. She said, "I would prefer to have a steady and knowledgeable hand," she said. Michigan, which saw 2024's second narrowest presidential percentage outcome, has competitive races this year for governor, U.S. Senate, and a U.S. House seat that is considered a toss-up. In that U.S. House race, Emanuel is backing Bridget Brink, a former ambassador to the Ukraine. In the interview, he declined to endorse any of the 3 major Democrats competing in the state's Senate race. William Lawrence, a 35-year-old community organizer and progressive candidate in the U.S. House primary that includes Brink, dismissed Emmanuel's support for his rival. He's, quote, I haven't met anybody in the 7th District who's waiting around for Rahm Emanuel's opinion, he said. It seems like he's most interested in punching the left. Emanuel is remaining true to his center-left instincts as he travels the country, but also trying to avoid completely alienating the party's progressive base. Minutes after criticizing Democratic missteps at the fundraiser, he showed a populist streak as he condemned corporate America for being, quote, timid souls, close quote, in the Trump era. Amen. Emanuel is also working to temper his reputation as a ruthless political brawler by occasionally offering glimpses of a softer, more sentimental family man. Still, the intensity he is known for is never far away. At the Economic Club, he told a story about his wife insisting years ago that if they ever had a 4th child, the newborn should be named Patience, which would give him, the father, a daily reminder of a life skill. His punchline, quote, I said, just remember one thing, patience is a waste of time. All right, jumping back to Iran. Headline, old Iranian fighter jets are forced into battle. Article starts off, for the Israeli F-35 pilot, it was hardly a fair fight. Lumbering up ahead was an Iranian Air Force Yak, Y-A-K, 130, a Russian-made subsonic jet trainer developed in the early 1990s and first flown almost 30 years ago. The Israeli pilot, flying one of the world's most advanced warplanes made in the United States, took aim and shot the Iranian jet easily, sending it streaking to the ground in a ball of fire. Iran is sending its creaking Air Force into the fight. Many of the planes are museum pieces, kept flying with scrounged parts and pluck, and stand little chance against modern warplanes. The tactics highlight the regime's all-in approach to a war against much more powerful foes threatening its survival. Attacks by Iranian jets, along with drones and missiles, contributed to the crowded skies and fog of war when 3 U.S. F-15s were downed by friendly fire over Kuwait on Sunday, the U.S. military said. Fortunately, no lives were lost in that confusion. The day after, a Qatari Air Force pilot shot down 2 Iranian Su-24s that approached the Persian Gulf. The Russian bombers entered service in the 1970s, holy cow, and were last produced more than 30 years ago. The age and weakness of Iran's warplanes, many purchased before the Shah was deposed by the revolution in 1979, is a vulnerability that forced the country to lean on the missile program that the U.S. and Israel are now targeting. Israel on Sunday destroyed a U.S.-made F-4 Phantom fighter bomber and an F-5 light fighter as they prepared for takeoff at the Tabriz airport in northwestern Iran over the weekend. The Vietnam-era F-4 entered service in the early 1960s and hasn't been in production for nearly half a decade. The F-5 is of similar vintage. The U.S. and Israeli warplanes, in contrast, have pounded Iran with thousands of airstrikes since starting the war on Saturday and have complete control over the skies across much of the country. Iran has responded with missile and drone attacks on targets ranging from Turkey to Oman, but has not been able to slow the onslaught from the Israeli and American attacks. Its Air Force hasn't provided much of a shield either. Israel and the U.S. are flying modern jets, including the F-35. The Lockheed Martin aircraft has a stealthy design that allows it to evade being targeted by surface-to-air missiles and enter Iranian airspace undetected. First launched a decade ago, it can fly at 1,200 miles an hour over a distance of nearly 1,400 miles without refueling and carries 4,000 pounds of guided bombs. Okay. All right. Next headline here, World News, Iranian war. Kurdish uprising would come with risks. Subheadline, Iran's neighbors fret over destabilization, ethnic groups worry if success is possible. If a ground war is to be fought in Iran, the first shots could be fired in the country's Kurdish areas where Kurdish militias say they are preparing to take on the government in Tehran, but only if they think they have a realistic chance of liberating themselves from regime forces. They are not there yet. A potential Kurdish uprising could mark a turning point in a war that mostly has been waged by air, paving the way for a more widespread popular revolt that could topple the Islamic Republic from below. It is an approach fraught with risks. A Kurdish insurgency could fuel the separatist ambitions of other ethnic groups, raising the threat of civil war and disintegration, which is a fear shared by many Iranians, including many who oppose the Islamic Republic. That's too bad. An immediate danger would be to Iran's Kurdish population, which could bear the brunt of a possible retaliation by Iran's security forces, which is reportedly 200,000 people, soldiers in size. Quote, there is a big opportunity, an opportunity for greater autonomy and to set up democracy, said an official with the Kurdish Freedom Life Party, one of several armed Iranian Kurdish groups based outside Iran. Quote, but there is also a risk. The Iranian regime killed many people during the protests, and they could do that again, especially in Kurdistan. Israeli forces are working to create the conditions for a popular revolt. They have hit targets linked to Tehran's repression apparatus. Many of the strikes have occurred in western Iran's Kurdish provinces, where they hit military bases, border guard posts, police stations, and other regional security centers. Israel and the U.S. have been longtime supporters of the Kurdish nation or population, and they are supporting some Iranian Kurds inside Iran, seeing them as an auxiliary force to wear down and destabilize the regime, according to a person briefed on the war. Israel's been supplying Kurdish groups with weapons for months. The idea behind the strategy is to open the way for a popular uprising in Kurdish majority areas that have bristled at the dominance of the Iranian government. Okay. The conflict has forced a de facto closure of the Strait of Hormuz, thereby trapping ships in the Persian Gulf while forcing Gulf oil producers to slash output and Asian refiners to hunt for alternative supplies. Foreign ministers of the Arab League member states will hold an emergency meeting on Sunday, the day after tomorrow, to discuss Iran's attacks on several countries in the region. The meeting will be held via video conference and was requested by Saudi Arabia. Israel has struck a number of sport venues and other sites in Tehran, targeting civilian places used by Iranian security forces in emergency situations, according to people familiar with the matter. On Thursday, the Israeli military urged residents of Beirut's southern suburbs to leave their homes amidst its offensive against Hezbollah. Many thousands of people live in Beirut's southern suburbs, which are predominantly Shiite Muslim. All right, let's change the topic. We may come back to it, but let me pause for a moment to remind you that you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. And let me take a moment here to wet my whistle. Here is a review of a television show. Steve Carell, who we all recall fondly with amusement from his role as the manager of The Office 5, 6, 7 years ago, portrays a meddling dad. Steve Carell's character in the likable, watchable, and even lovable movie or TV show entitled Rooster is classic Steve Carell. Self-aware, charming, boyish, incapable of reading a room, sidestepping a faux pas, or calculating nuance. He is certainly nicer than the character he played on The Office, Michael Scott, and less psychotic than John DuPont in the show he played, Foxcatcher, which was not really a comedy at all. Think of him as the 57-year-old virgin, temperamentally speaking. This is not to imply that the creator of the Rooster series, Greg Russo, who I think wrote the action novel Reacher, quote unquote, is ever less than an adult. When we meet him, the very popular writer has returned to his alma mater. Okay, this is getting a little confusing. Okay. When we meet Steve Carell's character, the very popular writer has returned to his alma mater of Ludlow College to be a guest speaker after many declined invitations, but with an ulterior motive. His daughter, art history professor Katie, portrayed by the marvelous Charlie Clive, never heard of, has been abandoned by her husband, Russia expert Phil Dunster, who's you may recall from the Ted Lasso show. He left her for a biotech student, who they will all learn is also pregnant. Greg thinks his presence at Ludlow will somehow help his daughter. His daughter thinks otherwise, especially after he accepts an offer to teach there full-time. Campus comedies seem to be flourishing like ivy on Harvard brick or mold in a bathroom. One can see the attraction for writers, the insular setting, the acceptance of eccentricity, the entrenchment of the otherwise unemployable, and the ease by which one can lampoon social trends. Steve Carell's character, who's clueless about just how politically incorrect he can be without even trying, gets chastised several times, though the circumstances are deliberately exaggerated. He refers to one unreceptive student, for example, as his, quote, white whale, close quote. And the students, untutored in Herman Melville, Moby Dick, accused Greg of both racism and body shaming. The creators of the series do slip in more significant criticisms of higher education and its ethics. The hockey coach, for instance, is struggling with his sobriety, and when he is drunk, he angrily assaults his players. Any faculty member in a department other than sports would be summarily fired and maybe indicted. There's also the issue of the radiant Dylan Shepard, the luminous actress Danielle Deadwyler, when her belligerent, misogynistic, chain-smoking colleague has a heart attack. She ascends to the role of acting dean of students. It's a job she was made for. The question is, will she keep it? A resolution to that will have to wait for the second season. Meanwhile, what helps make Rooster, the TV show, so engaging, even as it negotiates familiar territory, the sentence gets very convoluted. Anyway, all right, I think that's enough about that particular show. It sounds interesting. Here is something having to do with sports. And the headline is, this is about baseball. The headline is, "It's October Baseball in March. The World Baseball Classic, WBC, is a global hit with fans and stars who really want to win. Baseball has goblins lurking in its on-deck circle. The threat of an extended lockout in 2027 as the sport bickers over a salary cap." I wasn't aware of that. But I'm not here to panic about baseball, not today. I'm here to party. The World Baseball Classic is underway. Is there a more unlikely smash than this 2-week baseball tournament that features 20 national teams and wraps with a rowdy title game on March 17th in Miami? It shouldn't work. A far-flung round robin, held every 3 years, except when it's held every 4 years, it was canceled during COVID, was launched smack in the middle of spring training, before the major league season starts, before some of us have shoveled snow out of our driveways for the last time, ? I don't know about you, but it usually takes me a few months to thaw out for baseball. Sometimes I'm ready by June, other times mid-September. Basically, I need the ghost of Earl Weaver, former Baltimore manager, to bring me a hot dog and a cold one and scream at me to pay attention. Or I watch the WBC. Phew. This thing oozes with what every sporting event craves: real stakes, total athlete buy-in, and absurd camera-rattling atmosphere. From noisy stadiums in Asia and the Caribbean to an all-in U.S., the 20-year-old tournament has evolved into a worldwide hit, contested by players eager to win for national pride. The other night, social media was rocking with highlights from an exhibition game in the Dominican Republic between the Dominican Republic's stacked super team and the Detroit Tigers. It wasn't even an official WBC game, and the scenes were bonkers. The WBC achieved nirvana in 2023 when Team USA met Japan in the championship, and Shohei Ohtani, who most valuable player in the National League here in the United States, stood on the mound to face then California Angels teammate Mike Trout in the bottom of the ninth. This was the dream scenario. Baseball's very best, an edgy crowd, one-run game, 2 outs, a title on the line, and Ohtani getting the better of Trout on a filthy 3-2 count. Parentheses. How funny is it that this was the first exposure to Ohtani and Trout playing in a big game that mattered? Since then, Ohtani has gone to the Dodgers, and he's won 2 World Series rings, 2 more MVPs, and lifted the entire sport. Trout, meanwhile, remains in hiding in Anaheim. You know how the recent Olympic hockey was just, more in every possible way? The WBC can be like that. It's the roaring opposite of lazy foul ball spring training. At its best, it can feel like late October in the middle of March. I'm forgetting the best part: morning baseball. Who didn't wake up in the darkness this morning to catch a little Czech Republic versus Korea baseball broadcast from Japan? Okay, maybe you didn't. But those of us in the sports, those of us who believe that sports are better in the morning, always appreciate a little competition with our overnight oats. This year's WBC hubs are Houston, Miami, Tokyo, and San Juan, Puerto Rico. The favorites aren't hard to guess. The U.S., playing with names like Aaron Judge, Bryce Harper, Tariq Skubal, and Paul Skenes, Otani, who was just a designated hitter this time, and Dodger pal Yoshi Yamamoto's Japan, and that deep Dominican team with Vlad Guerrero Jr., who plays for the Toronto baseball franchise, and Juan Soto. So, in other words, favored teams are U.S., Japan, and Dominican Republic. Do you prefer Cinderella? How about Australia, winners on opening night against Taiwan? Or how about Great Britain? Or Nicaragua, managed by the 76-year-old World Series winner Dusty Baker? The man behind the spectacle is none other than Bud Selig, the former Major League Baseball commissioner who wanted to showcase and expand the game's international footprint. He's now 91 years old. Wow. Selig remembers a protracted battle to make the WBC happen, but believes the payoff has been extraordinary. And let me just take a moment to wet my whistle. And remind you that you are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Bud Selig is quoted as saying, "I am happy now to watch how good it is, how well received it is," Selig told the writer. Like a lot of things in life, it was one hell of a struggle to get it done. The main worry, all right, leaving Mr. Selig behind here, the main worry then and today is injury, the nightmare of a top player getting hurt before the major league season starts. Caution is taken with pitchers. They're on restrictive pitch counts with mandatory rest. While teams worry and the WBC's insurance provider has balked at insuring a few athletes, the players are the ones driving the event. They want to be out there because they've decided this thing really counts. My favorite wrinkle, says the writer, there's a mercy rule. If you get up 15 runs after the fifth inning, it's time to head to the ice cream truck and discuss it over drumsticks and popsicles. That's funny. It's all a welcome respite from the looming gloom of Major League Baseball labor negotiations, in which owners, aggravated by mega spenders like the Dodgers, are expected to press hard for a salary cap. It's long been the hottest button. Players, of course, are deeply opposed. A lockout delaying the 2027 season next year is not out of the question, and that would be a fiasco. Baseball's been on a heater in recent years with improved TV ratings, better pace of play with the pitch clock, and a stoppage like this, a lockout, could throw away significant momentum. The WBC is what baseball should always be if it could be. It's fanned unprecedented excitement to get Major League players into the 2028 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles. Baseball is set to be played at Dodger Stadium. I mean, come on. It's got to happen. Look at the World Baseball Classic. This is the way, referring to the fact that, baseball should be in the Summer Olympics. I guess that'll be a first. All right, let's shift gears to football, America's favorite sport. Used to be baseball, but football has kind of moved in and is now America's favorite sport. The headline is, as NFL free agency begins, salary cap soars to $300 million. So this is interesting. The reason why baseball might have a lockout in 2027 is because baseball doesn't have a salary cap, unlike the NFL. Baseball players don't want a salary cap for obvious reasons, but NFL players have lived with a salary cap for quite some time. Anyway, the article begins. The Las Vegas Raiders entered this NFL offseason armed with the types of assets that could quickly turn around a floundering franchise. They're now led by Clint Kubiak, who is the coach now. He was the brains behind the Seattle Seahawks Super Bowl winning offense, and he is now the new head coach of the Los Angeles Raiders. All right, sorry. They hold the #1 pick in the draft, which is widely expected to be used on Indiana's Fernando Mendoza, and they have nearly $90 million in room under the salary cap to spend on new players. But with the salary cap soaring to $301 million per team next season, nearly double what it was a decade ago, teams like the Raiders are running into a new kind of problem. When free agency begins next week, there simply won't be many good players to spend all that cash on. This year's free agent class is widely viewed as unusually thin. And just for purposes of background, a free agent in football is somebody who is not contractually bound to play for the team that he played with the previous season and can shop himself with other teams to see if he can get a better deal. Okay, so this year's free agent class is viewed as unusually thin. I guess there aren't many players looking to shop themselves. And the pool of free agents will only get shallower by the time the market opens as teams re-sign their own players. Now, that odd set of circumstances means that the few stars who are available may be available to land eye-popping contracts, while some lesser-known players will inevitably command surprising sums. So that's, let's see if there's anything about the Buffalo Bills. All of that of it, I'm not seeing anything about the Bills, unfortunately. But there's a lot of references made to the Miami Dolphins, who the Bills have beaten fairly regularly in the last 5 or 6, 7 years. So all of that available cash for the NFL players means that it's never been better to be someone like a linebacker named Jalen Phillips. In a weak free agent class, Phillips's advantages makes him stand out. A mid-season trade acquisition from the Miami Dolphins, where he'd been playing, Phillips was a chaos agent for a Philadelphia Eagles defense that was one of the best units in the NFL. So in other words, Miami traded Phillips to the Eagles mid-season in 2025, 2026, and he did well there. Moreover, he's still only 26 years old, so his most productive years will still be ahead of him. That puts him in a position to cash in, even if he's far from perfect. Despite his success consistently pressuring opposing quarterbacks, he only had 5 sacks last year. He also missed most of the 2023-2024 seasons due to serious injuries. Most of the other high-profile names on the market come with question marks too. And I think we will stop there. All right, let me see here now. Here's a film review. Headline, A Period Frankenstein Flop. Subheadline, Maggie Gyllenhaal, actress. Maggie Gyllenhaal's semi-satirical film sees a monster looking for love in 1930s Chicago. Now, so she may be not only acting in this, but she may also be directing. But Christian Bale's in the movie too, and he's phenomenal, I think. It took more than 50 years, but we've finally gotten a successor to Mel Brooks's Young Frankenstein that focuses on the bride of Frankenstein. There's even another formal wear rendition of Puttin' on the Ritz. The new parody is lurching and ungainly. However, stitching parts of various things together seems to come easier to mad scientists than filmmakers. The jokey yet outraged movie entitled The Bride, ! Was written and directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal, or maybe it's Gyllenhaal. I apologize. Maggie Gyllenhaal is a semi-spoof of the 1935 sequel, quote, The Bride of Frankenstein, close quote, often called the greatest of all 1930s monster movies. However, he refers to it as a semi-spoof of The Bride of Frankenstein because it was pretty clear what Mel Brooks was trying to do, but Maggie Gyllenhaal's purpose is obscure. A clunky framing device, filmed in black and white in an otherwise color picture and recurring throughout the film, features the spirit of Frankenstein author Mary Shelley, who speaks to us from beyond the grave. Amid much vamping and cackling, she tells us that since her death, she's been summoning her strength to the point that now, in 1936, she has gained the ability to control the mind of a woman named Ida, who is working undercover as a floozy for the police gathering evidence against a Chicago mobster. With Shelley remote controlling her brain, Ida turns into a crazed party girl and dies, falling downstairs and goes to her grave temporarily. Which makes her the perfect mate for a lonely bachelor monster. Christian Bale's Frankenstein, as he calls himself, no nonsense about being merely Dr. Frankenstein's unnamed creature, is now 117 years old, approximately, and desperate for a lady friend. He presents himself at the Chicago digs of an outcast physician, Dr. Euphronius, who's played by Annette Bening, who has been reanimating small dead animals. Could she help him satisfy his carnal urges? Well, that's kind of a bizarre plot twist. He'll even dig up the grave of a suitable love match. Okay, well, that's semi-interesting. Okay, going down the home stretch here, 5 minutes left to go. Taylor Swift tests her powers on a London eyesore. A subheadline, a drab London mall getting rave reviews after the pop star's music video. All right, the article starts. This mall has seen better days. The once bustling complex with all the high street favorites is largely empty, with over 70 vacant units. Floorboards are loose, buckets collect water from the leaking roof, and the cafes are a mere facade. It turns out all it needed was a visit from Taylor Swift. The pop star filmed a part of the music video for her latest single, Opalite, in the mall that's called Croydon's Whitgift Centre, which is an unremarkable mall in a less remarkable London suburb. When the Croydon Centre appears, when the Croydon Centre historically has appeared in the last 5 years or so in the news, it's often for knife crime and drugs. But the mall apparently was the perfect backdrop for Swift's video, inspired by 1990s rom-coms, and she released it in February. It features a scene where she and another actor go down an escalator holding pretzels. The video, which reached over 15 million views on YouTube, also has appearances from a Scottish singer, an Irish actor, and talk show host Graham Norton. And Swifties are here for it. I lost my head, said Swiftie fan. Let me start again. Swiftie fans are supporting it quite enthusiastically. One such supporter said, "I lost my head. I was so happy," the moment she found out the music video had been filmed in her local mall. So this particular Swiftie fan apparently lives near this mall. All right, and so she grew up in Croydon and is one of many who rushed to visit the site in the days after the video dropped. Some have gathered to recreate the pretzel scene on the escalator or to take selfies outside. Social media has rebranded the mall the Whit Swift Center.
The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another